Welcome to Divergent Discussions Live, a very informal conversation. Today we have Michael from the Deep Dive podcast. I love that he has a motto called, the oversharing with a purpose. And I think that what he's doing online is incredible. There we go.
Hello,
Hello.
Jess. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Yeah. Now, so just for content, I interviewed Jess for my podcast, the Deep Dive podcast, which will be released probably around late August, early September at the moment. So yeah, so that should be really, really good. And we were just talking about, I think, sort of your autism journey and stuff like that, and how you sort of do it on your socials and stuff like that, which will be very interesting.
Yeah, it was a really good conversation, and like, yeah, I guess we've been talking for a little bit, so we're very comfortable right now.
Mm.
But I guess the aim of these divergent discussion lives is to bring those topics out into the community. So my husband and I, we have these random conversations, and sometimes those conversations are about really interesting, like out of this world concepts, but sometimes those topics are important and they need to be discussed. And I just opened it up to Michael. I said, what would you like to talk about? And you mentioned that you want to talk about discrimination in the workplace. So I thought if anyone has any questions to start off with, for Michael, or any experiences about, being neurodivergent in the workplace, pop those in the chat below, or if you're watching this afterwards, comment them down below, and I'm sure Michael will be happy to answer them for you. To start off on a really light note, I'm going to ask everyone what's their favorite current fidget or stim toy. So
This,
what's yours, Michael?
this is mine. This is sort of like, something from JCast. So it's basically like a F-type plug. So it's basically you just screw it off and screw it back on. So it's like an old TV sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've got this also little thing from Amazon as well, which is and I've done it the wrong way. So basically you sort of like spin it like this.
That's so cool. The colors are really awesome.
Yeah, I like it because it's sort of like it's got a lot of moving parts and stuff like that as well, which is I think really great. So
Yeah, and watching the colors go around can be nice, visually pleasing.
yeah.
So everyone, what's your favorite fidgets or stim toys or whatever you like to call them? You can pop those in the chat, but I'm going to hand it over to you, Michael. You wanted to talk about, your experience with workplace discrimination and being, ADHD
Mm.
in the workplace. So how has that been for you?
Okay, so in November, I'll basically give you a little bit of context. In November 2023, I suffered a severe autistic meltdown, which I had to be hospitalised for. So basically, back in May 2023, there was a couple of staff members who actually supported me. Obviously, I've got it through a disability support agency and stuff like that. And then what actually happened is basically those people actually left and a new staff member joined that basically wasn't trained on that autism type of thing. And then basically my accommodations, I wrote down my accommodations. So basically I did a working with Michael document and a how my autism affects me and how my autism affects you. And I basically got ignored with that. So I tried to sort of like, have several meetings and stuff like that with those staff members and management and all that type of thing. I think the problem is basically sort of I just got ignored, and I was trying to sort of like mask it for a very long time. I was trying to basically sort of just plow through and stuff like that, which I was taught that when you sort of like go into a workplace, you give your 100%, 110% of your effort and stuff like that. But the problem is I did that literally,
Yes.
which basically sort of meant I was burning out, and I didn't realize that at the time. So what actually happened is basically like on the 2nd of November 2023, I basically texted my wife and basically sort of said, look, I can't do this job anymore. And basically about 10 o'clock, I went the 13 health number, which is the hotline in Queensland, to sort of talk to a nurse. I was basically sort of talking about my symptoms. My hands were trembling, my hands were shaking. I was just about to cry and all that type of thing. And basically they recommended I take an ambulance to hospital.
Yeah.
So that's that's how severe it was. And then I got referred to a GP, and they basically sort of said, "Look, you got to have stress leave," and eventually I had to leave my job. So
And that was from a disability
yeah,
provider, you said? Was
disability
it
employment provider.
employment provider? That's horrible. Like you've told me this story before, but I just want to express like that is not okay. That is actually awful that they just dismissed, all of your accommodations, even when you outwardly put them in a poster and things for them to reference. And how, so after you had that experience and you went to the hospital, what was their process like? Did they talk to you at all, or did they just sort of let
Okay,
you go and
so
leave?
giving you a little bit of context, this is obviously not surprisingly. Wasn't my first autistic meltdown, but I think I had an autism meltdown back in 2016 when I was working for another organisation, but it wasn't quite as severe.
Mm,
So what they did was, I think, compared to like 2016, I went to the hospital and stuff like that, and they gave me Valium to calm me down. This time, obviously, back in 2023, they had a sort of like a big sort of like mental health care sort of unit where basically sort of like it was a nice relaxing room. They had plenty of plants. They had sort of like, things to sort of like, put a sort of like a blanket on and basically rest, which I think was really, really good. I was in the process of applying for my NDIS plan at that particular time because my daughter is on NDIS as well. And basically, sort of like, people have said to me, because I'm autistic, why aren't you on the
yeah.
NDIS and stuff like that? So basically, sort of, I got this plan through, obviously, and then I was basically approaching. I was applying through the NDIS at the moment to actually sort of get on the plan, and then I was applying. This is obviously through a Maze Peer Assist, which I thought was awesome and stuff like that. And they guided me, and I was talking to them at the time, and
Mm,
they basically said that that's obviously they had needed to put that as one of the goals because they needed to sort of like work through that process to be able to sort of demask and make sure that sort of I regain my authentic self because I was trying to hide that over the last 49 years because I'm 50
yeah.
years old at the moment, and I only sort of really sort of like reclaimed my authentic self really last year.
And the fact that it got to such a huge moment for you, like to be going to hospital for a meltdown, it just, for me, I would probably see those signs in someone. You kind of see those signs of burnout coming in. But I guess for people who aren't, aware of what that looks like for people, what would what would you describe, the signs that were happening leading up to that moment? So, what could people look out for in other, if they're, person at their work is, autistic, what could they look out for that's
I was
sort of signs?
continuously tired all the time. Basically, at the weekends, I couldn't even function. That was
Mm,
that. That was how bad it was. Like in the lunch hour, I had to sort of like rest for like about half an hour to basically sort of basically sort of like claim myself for the sort of the afternoon ahead. Because
mm,
basically sort of like when it's heavy like this, my brain gets really tired. My brain gets really sort of like my brain gets into shutdown
yeah.
mode. So I have to really sort of sleep it off. So I think
Mm,
sort of like, the worst thing is, trying to sort of like, survive and trying to care for my children and stuff like that when I'm tired and lethargic.
mm,
And so that's obviously the worst thing because you sort of like, you're being 100% at work, but then the problem is basically sort of then you're tired and stuff like that and at the end of the day and stuff like that, so you can't be present for your children, your wife.
yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. I think you hit it spot on before. You said a lot of autistic people will think, you got to put 100% in when you're working, but we take that well, a lot of us take that very literally. And, a lot of people have that assumption acknowledge that, you don't exactly need to put 100% in when you go into the workplace. People have their times to sort of recalibrate and to, have rest in between. But when we're told that, you got to put your all in there, we're literally going to put our all in there so that till the point where we're going to actually detriment our own health. And I think a lot of people, it'd be nice for people to know and to understand that when you tell someone who is neurodivergent, something like that, like put your all into this, or do 100%. A lot of people are going to take that literally, and I did take that literally as well when I was in the workplace. I now work from home because I feel like I cannot be in the workplace. I have done several jobs before, and I, yeah, I burnt out in those workplaces. I couldn't do it anymore. Um, I never got to the point that you got to, Michael, but I think that I definitely can relate to being super, exhausted on the weekends and that impacting my family's life and everything. So we did have a comment. I think it was Terry.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So basically, how do you navigate drama in the workplace, as in co-workers have drama among each other, and you're just trying to stay neutral? It is hard and stuff like that to navigate
yeah.
drama and stuff like that, because I don't like drama at the best of times, because sort of like drama, 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 and they're just trying to sort of like just trying to sort of tear down everybody else and stuff like that. And you're trying to sort of like you're trying to stay neutral, and you're trying to say we're sort of logical thinkers to a degree. So you're sort of like we sort of think logically what is the best way of doing it, and what is the sort of like the non-judgmental way of doing it. So
Yeah.
I try and do it from that perspective, but the problem is basically I think sort of a lot of people sort of like they put emotion into it, and I think that's half the problem, I think.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of the times that can contribute to your burnout as well is because you're trying to stay neutral, you're trying to sort of people please so that everyone's kind of okay.
Yeah, and
But
people
a lot of people,
pleasing, that's also the main problem why I burnt out as well, because people pleasing, I was trying to sort of like make sure that everything was 100% and all that type of thing, whereas I think the half the problem was people pleasing.
mm,
It also sort of, basically sort of like, I got took advantage of, and basically sort of it counted my mental health. So
yeah,
sometimes you just got to put those boundaries in the first place, and sometimes
mm,
when you sort of like when you first start that job, you're trying to impress people and stuff like that, and
yeah.
that can be taken advantage of to a degree.
Yeah, and I think I've watched many conversations on this topic and listened to a lot of people talk on it. And I guess there's a lot of varying views on how we can better support neurodivergent people in the workplace. I know personally, all it would take is just a few simple accommodations or a conversation had between my boss and myself. Maybe I could work from home a couple of days a week, or maybe I could wear my headphones for certain periods of time without it looking like rude or I'm not being part of the workplace. I think and it's hard though, because also there's that sort of privacy factor where it's like, well, hold on, I shouldn't have to disclose all this to everyone to make sure everyone knows.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think there was a really good question that the LLA Belks conference actually sort of did. I can't remember. Marie Kemen actually sort of suggested that. And then Annie Crow actually sort of provided the answer, which I thought was super, basically sort of super essential, because basically sort of you only need to basically sort of put a one-page document basically sort of saying what your what your diagnosis is, how, and also how it affects you in the workplace. But
mm.
that shouldn't be discriminated against, because obviously they're asking for too much information sometimes, because
Mhm.
they don't need to know your entire life history.
Yeah, and that was another thing that came up at the conference was you don't have to hand over the report of your diagnosis to anyone.
That is
Obviously,
your private
it's
information.
your private information. And I think a lot of assessors will give you like a letter separate to your diagnosis report, which will just simply state what diagnosis you have, and it doesn't have to go into anything else. That's this information that our workplace doesn't need to know unless you want them to know.
Yeah,
I
exactly. If you
think,
want them to know, I mean,
yeah.
it's totally really up to the person who's actually sharing that information. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think Terry said it's also hard because you're trying to just say what everyone
What
wants to
everyone wants to
hear.
hear and takes a toll and drains your battery. I hear that. I hear that so well because I think sort of like, it's it's more like what everybody wants to hear rather than the uncomfortable truth.
Yeah, and I think I've had a hard time understanding when I should step in and tell the truth and when I should just, stay out of it and sort of people please and make sure that everyone is okay. Because to me, like a solution would mean the world to this person if there's something going wrong in the workplace. But yeah, I'm slowly learning that not a lot of people want those solutions.
Yeah,
um,
well, that's the biggest problem because I'm trying to sort of go into workplaces as like in a little bit of workplace training and also sort of trying to interview workplaces at the moment, trying to basically sort of work out what barriers are actually preventing people from preventing workplaces from trying to hire autistic people in the first place. I
mhm,
think there's that misconception. It's all about money and stuff like that, and it's all about the costs and stuff like that. But it's not really that much about it at all. It's basically sort of like they want to try and do their best for their organisation. They want to try and sort of like be supported. They
mm.
want to try and sort of be sort of happy in the workplace, a happier work person and stuff. Or basically a happier person in the workplace can basically sort of translates into a sort of like a happy home life as well, which is sort of it's more support in the workplace is so essential. I think sort of it's not done enough,
I
if that makes sense.
think, yeah, and I think leading on from that, like if we go back to that question of, not having to reveal everything to everyone, it should just be a general conversation anyway between employer and employee, like what will help you be the best person you can be in this workplace. That conversation can be had for everyone. It doesn't even have to be just for neurodivergent people. It can be a conversation that everyone goes through and everyone will benefit from it. The same goes for schools. Like everyone would benefit from neuro affirming practices. It's not going to harm anyone or anything like that. So I think that if it was just like a blanket, like,
Mm,
um, support meeting or some kind of, doesn't even have to be a meeting, we don't like
mm,
meetings. It can be like an email or it can be a conversation had over chat or something where you can tell your employer about yourself and tell them how you can thrive basically in this workplace. What could they do to support you? And as you said, it can be such simple things, and they always see dollar signs. They always think it's going to be super
mm,
expensive, but
yeah.
it's not. It's really not.
It's not. It's basically just collaboration with the person. So
Mhm.
and trying to sort of like the more the collaboration you've got, the better sort of outcomes you get. Like this is leading on to my next point. We're actually recording an episode on Thursday for the deep dive roundtable called "What Does Inclusive Education Look Like?" So that's going to be a really sort of good conversation. So I'll be releasing that probably fairly soon after that's been recorded.
Mhm.
So it's going to be
That's
really sort
awesome.
of like intensive conversation because I think sort of there's more, you know, there's there's some schools that well, my last or basically my daughter's last school, she got discriminated against, and now she's got a really awesome school that sort of like accommodates her, and she's doing really well out of that.
Oh, good. I'm glad that she had that, ending, but it's also not great that she had that experience to start with. I think if we're talking about accommodations in the workplace, that needs to start as accommodations in the school system. That's
Mm,
where we learn that we should be bending towards neuronormative practices. That's when we like learn that we need to put our all in and hide ourselves and mask ourselves.
Mm,
Then that translates to the workplace. So I really do think the school system needs such an overhaul. It needs a huge transformation when it comes to
mm.
neurodivergent kids, all kids really, to therefore help our kids learn that they don't have to be a specific way or mask themselves in the workplace, because as you said, that leads to burnout, that can lead to meltdowns, that can lead to severe health, health detriments. And as you mentioned, it forced you out of the workplace. So what does that look like for you now,
Well, I mean, sort of
working?
like that's why I created the deep dive podcast in the first place, because I've interviewed so many autistic and neurodivergent people that are thriving, basically, sort of despite well, basically, despite the fact they're autistic. That's probably the wrong word, but basically, sort of like they're thriving even though they're autistic. If that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if I'm making the wrong sort of assumptions here. I do apologize for that. I do
don't
sort of.
apologize.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
So
it's a
basically,
learning
it's sort of
process.
yeah, and it's also sort of trying to make sure that sort of like they survive in the workplace, and also sort of we're trying to sort of elevate these autistic voices and neurodivergent voices, because it's so essential and stuff like that for people to be recognised and stuff like that. And it's just not there's hardly any spaces where it's done enough. So I think
Mhm.
sort of the more spaces we have and the more people the guests we have, the better. So
Mhm.
and I've really appreciated that, because I've got to meet so many sort of fantastic people through the space as well, and also obviously so many through the Neuro Access Network, and also the Neurodivergent Business Collective as well, which I'm both a part of.
Oh, cool. They're good places for people to access, I guess, if they're
Yeah,
looking for information.
yeah. Well,
Um,
information and also connecting with Neurokin. I think it's so important to connect with Neurokin. Like at
mm,
the Yellow Ladybugs conference, there needs to be more sort of conferences like that, where sort of like the Yellow Ladybugs was the OG of that.
mm.
And I think sort of there needs to be more, sort of more conferences where people can connect with their neurokin on a regular basis, and just hang out and stuff like that, because it's like it's like you said, it's all autistic Christmas down there.
It was literally, yeah, it was the most accommodated I've ever felt. It was still overwhelming because there was a lot of people there, but I think that they did everything that they could to make it like as um, accommodating to us as possible. And I'm just, yeah, I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm really glad that you are doing what you do, Michael, because just, elevating people's voices in the autism world can really make a difference, and it can help people to understand. So, where can people find you, access your socials?
Okay, so the socials at the Deep Dive AU. So there's the website deepdiveau.net. Just
Mhm.
answering the question, basically, where can I get the link to where you talk about autism in the school system? There is an episode called Force for Good with Sarah Middleton, which is actually a perfect example of that.
Mhm.
Just go to the Deep Dive AU and you can sort of find that episode. So we're on Instagram at the Deep Dive AU, on TikTok at the Deep Dive AU, on YouTube at the Deep Dive AU, and also at deepdiveau.net on the website as well.
Awesome. And I'll grab some links off you as well as that episode that you just mentioned, just so that everyone can have access to all of those. But thank you so much for coming live with me and being my first Divergent discussion live.
Yeah,
I really
it's
appreciate
been
it.
fantastic. I think sort of it flowed really well, and I'm glad I was able to sort of like share my passion and all that type of thing. We need more people to share their passions.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I think that you have a great story. Not that it was a great story, but it's an empowering story for a lot of people who experience the same thing, and just let them know they're not alone. And yeah, that we need change in this world.
Yeah,
Um,
we need change in the school system, in the workplace, and also, with some sort of like, people, we're trying to sort of cut the ableism out of the system. So I think it's sort
yes,
of, once we get the ableists out of the system, or the ableism out of the system, I think it's going to be a much better place for all of us.
imagine that world. It'll be so good.
So
All
we're
right,
both
thank
creating it
you.
together, and I know there's a lot of people on Instagram that want to create this world as well. So, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, there's more people. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. If you have any other questions, put them in the comments below. But I will see you guys in my next live.
Thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.